Welcome. Water is life. This is the deep end. You may not want to be here. If you want to learn, I take no pleasure in you floundering. I don't laugh at people who fall or slip or get confused. I don't like taking pleasure in other people's suffering, ever. It's not me. I suffer too much as a result. Sometimes when you terrify people, they stay away. And some people need to stay away. But I let life do that to you. It's not a space I hold. Transcending the ego, wherever we go, we will find there's a definite place deep within your sacred mind where you must resign from who you used to be in order to see exactly who we are learning to be together through all kinds of weather. Light is a feather. Be with your soul. Breathe in your heart. Welcome. Bring it, bring it, bring it. Bring your heart, bring your time. This is a deep activation season. It's going to keep flowing. And the choice is to resist or persist with your dream, to stay with it, to honor it, to integrate. There's such a dramatic difference between how you respond to the weather of the spiritual world. Now, by all means, find shelter. It's good to know you can take shelter. And yet, if you stay within the shelter, you're going to start to feel the tension because the presence of spiritual potential is going to pull you. Who you can be in relation to the new spirit flows will be present as long as you're in proximity. So you will be fighting with your potential self if you keep saying no. Well, part of you is going, come on, let's go deeper. You have to be able to judge whether you can handle that or not. Let's imagine I've got 1,000 people around me coming deeper into an intense challenge. I cannot monitor you. I will do my best to be present for those who need it. Others among us will do our best to be present for those who need it. But you have to be the ultimate arbiter of whether or not you're ready and whether or not you need to take a break. You've got to know how to do that. That's baseline. To transcend the belief in yourself as this. What's your gender? What's your name? What's the number of years you have? This is a whoosh. This is like a fortress of identity for so many. This is like a stone temple of knowing who you are. And to transcend this is terrifying. And it's supposed to be, because you need to stay away from transcending this until you're ready. And when you're ready, sometimes you don't want to be. When you're ready, sometimes Spirit's saying, it's time to come deeper. There are multiple signs. I'm going to give you a few. One, you have strange emotional states that are both quite familiar and completely out of relation to the reality around you. That you don't see a direct connection between how you're ending up in this mental emotional space. Two, you have strange visions, repeated scenes of a similar tone, potentially extreme, violent, dramatic, tragic, and just recurring. And it might just be the edge of the emotion of it. But again, there's a familiarity to it. Three, a face or a name that is just both recurring and it just invokes something in you. Like you can feel it, and yet you don't know this person. Like who is this person? These are three basic signs that you're getting in touch with a past life. And this is more than just a sign that you're getting in touch with a past life. This is a sign that you're ready to transcend your gender, your number of years you have, your name in this life. So let's talk about this, because just because you start to believe in spiritual reality doesn't mean everything you experience can be taken at face value. First of all, the big one that's kind of funny. There was a gathering of some sort in Western United States where people came together they all believed in past lives. There were 4 Napoleons. Like, WTF? There's a whole strain of folks where you believe in past lives and you're just utterly convinced you are Nefertiti. You are, the big ones. And so I have to introduce you to a very simple discernment. You need to maintain your discernment. Now, what you have to do is stop letting logic be dominant, because the logic we're living in is sick. So when we're living in sick logic, you don't want to build anything on that. Pardon me for mixing my metaphors. You don't want to create a sacred house or temple on shitty foundations. And a lot of foundations are basically frozen shit. So they seem hard, but then as soon as it heats up, they melt and it's nothing to rest on. So for this reason in particular, we have to tell logic to maintain a back seat. But then we want logic to participate through the art of discernment. Just because you see a vision in your mind's eye doesn't mean it's a vision of a past life. I see visions of people who are seeking my help or attention all the time. And sometimes they show up and give me direct messages on the computer in the material world, but I've seen them first psychically. This has happened for decades. So there are lots of reasons your spiritual paranormal abilities might be invoked, and you have to maintain this backseat discernment. So you're not discarding logic. Logic doesn't drive in the same way. We're rewriting it, and you begin with this questioning with a gentle heart. Yeah, there's something really deep about that. What is it? Because it's perfectly possible to end up in someone else's mind. It's kind of freaky, but it's very possible. If you end up in a deep state of surrender and receptiveness, you can be in someone else's mind, and it really isn't your own. And over time, you have to learn to tell the difference between this and a past life memory. It's a crucial skill. Heart. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. You are welcome. I appreciate you and your attention and you sharing your time with us. We're building something. We're creating something. This is an emerging community that the strength is really exciting to be a part of. And to participate is to tune. We're tuning with each other, and it is wonderful. As we tune with each other, we're tuning with the earth herself. There's purpose to this. For those of you who are musicians, if you want multiple instruments to play together, you have to have a shared tuning. This is not a subtle challenge. If you're not in a shared tuning, it sounds terrible. And the simple principle to appreciate is there's a world of karmic battle. Call it the karmic ocean. But it's full of torrents and fights and confusions and struggles over identity. And there is a true, deeper attunement to the heartbeat of the earth, the earth's hearth. These are separate. The earth created space for the karmic ocean to gather and ultimately turn into compost. She steams off the water and leaves everything that's left to rot. We are approaching the time when we see this transition where we're no longer trapped within the karmic spaces. They no longer have the power to define everything we do. So before we get back into past lives, we're going to address this in a way that I believe is going to make a haunting impact on you. Because once you start to see this, there's a devastating grief that needs to come. With that, I'll take a break and say hello to whoever's here. Say hi. Say hello. Corey, thank you for being here. Angie, good morning. Tom, Holy Tuesday. Bless your heart. Alicia, thank you for being here. Good morning to you. Krishu Helgi. Wow, what a lovely name. Forgive me to the extent I mispronounced it. Cre- Crease, Creasu Helgi. Creasu Helgi. Thank you for all. We need more. Yes, we do. Oh my gosh. We really do. And that's what we're going for. Sarah, thank you for being here. Helgi, thank you for clarifying. Oh, goodness. You are welcome here. Well, thank you for catching the beginning. Thank you for your likes. I appreciate it. I appreciate the one who just gave a like in this moment, and for those of you who choose to in the future. All right. I'm going to give you another opportunity. Tune out, step away if you have a sense that this is maybe too much for you. When I was young, I was taught to swim, and as I remember it, they threw me in the deep end, and I didn't know how to hold my breath yet. And I went under, and I sputtered, and I came up, but it didn't build my confidence. I refused to go back. I was horrified. It was an ineffective teaching style for me. There is a place for being thrown in over your head, but I do believe your own agency needs to be involved whenever possible. It's not for me to do that against your will. It's for the earth herself, and she will. We're often challenged with situations that it's like we are thrust into the deep end. And when that happens, you got to learn to swim. You can't say this isn't fair. And if you do, that's going to inhibit your ability to survive. This, however, you can tune out. You can leave. It's a choice. Because as you engage these thoughts, this is medicine. These are swimming lessons for the deep end. But if it creates an allure in you that's beyond your capacity to embrace, you need to know yourself well enough to accept that. There's a reason the children are wrestling intently with gender roles. And it traces under. There are lots of issues that matter. They could be framed and reframed and discussed. But under is this edge where we realize our true self is existent beyond this lifetime. And thus we know ourselves as both male and female. And our bodies and our spirits are created to generate this experience within the body we're in now. But the mental framework that we've inherited prohibits this. It fights against it. It diminishes it. It shames it. It confuses it. Men aren't allowed to be this. Women aren't allowed to be this. And as much as we think we've made progress, we haven't made as much progress as we think we've made. To make sense of this is to gain some perspective. There's a reason people stay in the muck, and it's stunning. There is a startling, almost terrifying reason people stay in shit in your lives. Because as soon as you get out, you have to see how bad it is. When you're in it, you could convince yourself you're a pig rolling in the mud. You could say, the smell doesn't matter, I'm used to it. You could say, I have no chance of figuring out what sharp object just poked me, whatever. You could avoid it by numbing yourself to the reality. And when you live in a collective experience that's entirely grounded in numbing out a certain range of terror, you're just choosing which asshole tells you what to do. You're just choosing which invasive, unacceptable behavior you're going to put up with. And you're just choosing between several. Your power rests in essentially voting for who's going to torture you. This is the truth for the vast majority of human beings still. It works like this. What is consent? What is consent? I suggest to you that we're going through a transition time where consent goes from some version of saying yes means yes to you get multiple opportunities to say no. And the person you're engaging with checks in and says, hey, are you sure you're okay? Because if you want to step back, you can. That's what I'm doing with you. I'm saying, hey, if you need to take space, do so. By checking in, we have a much more full presence. Because if you can't say no, you can't fully say yes. The only presence that has the right to force you into change is the earth herself. Human beings don't. And when human beings try to play that role, things don't go well. The reason this matters so much is because you are invited into a much better space. We go into the deep end because we're swimming across a boundary. And when we get to the other side of this, we're in a much better world. But you have to be able to swim across. And as you do, you have to be willing to gain perspective on how bad it is. And the terror of accepting how bad it is you're not going to be able to save everybody. You can't make a decision for everyone that you love. Many of them just simply flat out can't handle it. They can't swim in the deep end. And you have to decide, are you going to keep playing a torturous role that's increasingly ineffective? Are you going to keep playing a role where you are essentially masquerading as the one who's not well, even though you are more well than most of the people around you? Are you going to keep playing this role? Are you really doing them a favor? How many of you spend time with someone else and they are better off afterwards? They're happier. They're less tense because you took on the dissonance. How many of you is this true for? There's a role that people play as you awaken. You awaken a little more than everyone else, and you gain flexibility. You gain the ability to retune to other people. And when you retune to them, you give them your time, and you give them becoming someone they want you to be. Now, this is a skill. They couldn't do this for you. It's not a trade. They couldn't. They are too trapped within their identity as it is. It's a stone castle for them. And you're not going to be able to knock it over anytime soon. It's not up to you. But the recognition that you are in this more capable, competent, awakened state, no. You're essentially living a lie in a world, in a way of being that doesn't recognize you. You have to join a context that is smaller than you really are. As one of my teachers said once, we are living out a sacred space that is medicine for the Western intellectual disease. The disease that places past mental understandings as the absolute priority over any change. The disease that states you have to prove yourself based in terms that were established decades ago, generations ago. You have to prove yourself based in those terms, essentially kowtowing to dead white men. Who made these rules? Who made these rules? Has it ever occurred to anybody that it's super ridiculous to try to build everything in the future off the past so directly? It's a phenomenal lack of faith in reality to suggest that humanity is the ultimate arbiter of everything. What if it's possible for spirit to reach in and give you a new vibe and you to just hold it? Like, why is this so radical? What if it's possible for spirit to reach in and give you a new vibe and you just learn to hold it? And your reality is reframed around this change. I want you to be present with this potential. I want you to be present with this potential. And then you ask yourself, from this space where you have surrendered your addiction to the circumstances around you, where you have surrendered your addiction to defining yourself based in how society can perceive you, you are free. You are free. And as you move through life, you are burning a more intense fire. And as you burn this fire, first and foremost, people will learn to back away. They will. If you give them that space and you demonstrate you have some degree of control over how bright you get, how much you fuel your fire, they'll learn to step away. You can learn to claim the space around you, psychically and spiritually. I get in very few fights with other people anymore. I detect them spiritually early. I mentioned earlier in this sequence, I will often see the flash of someone's face as they reach out to me psychically. Sometimes that's in direct correlation with going to my computer and finding out someone sent me a message. Spiritual reality is another dimension. People are calling it the fifth. with time existing through the fourth, different than being the fourth. And from this perspective, we have this view of time that allows us to pick up on experience before it happens, before it occurs in the material plane. And thus, with this warning, I can detect hostility directed at me and redirect it or dance around it. Doesn't take care of everything, but it takes care of a lot. And this is the kind of power you invoke when you put love first. The power of love is a curious thing. Make a one man weep, make another man sing. You're going to own it. Let me tell you, there's a little bit of a sense of slavery that goes to it. To be a slave to love is to accept you're not going to be able to do a lot of the things you wanted to do before. They just won't work. It'll make you feel like shit. You won't enjoy a lot of the things you used to enjoy. Doesn't taste the same. Leaves you with tension. Now, a lot of people resist this as if the earth is shackling you. It's a choice. If you accept one presence, the spirit of the love of the earth coursing through you, you will no longer be able to control the impact you have on the world around you. But what you are doing is giving everyone else a lot more respect. You're giving everyone else the respect that they have to make their own choices. Woo! You can do this. You can do this. Well, thank you for being here for as long as you can be. And you know, here's what happens next. Once you accept this, you stop talking to people who aren't going to be able to hear you because you can tune in enough to recognize the difference. And until you tune in enough, allow yourself the presence of being in between. You're going to find out whether people can dance with you. And when they show you who they are, believe them. Keep your distance, keep your space, and do it with compassion. The reason people can't be present with your intensity, your vision, your recognition, your emotion, your spirit, is because they are not prepared to deal with those forces within themselves yet. No shame in that. 2 years ago, you weren't. There's a surrender in accepting that people may behave irrationally around you, even unacceptably, because they're trying to draw a boundary they don't know how to draw. They're trying to say, you're too much for me. And in some cases, you might have to say, okay, don't take it personally. Do not take it personally. Definitely don't internalize any judgment you're given by people who are malicious when they get afraid. Because some people are malicious. They will call you names. They will attempt to define who you are as something sick because they feel sick in your presence. And if you own that, you will literally feel the dissonance that they have defined as you. You have to say, no, I own nothing from you, and I own everything that is mine. And you'll find you're living more deeply in the light every time you say that. You're letting the light be the presence of a fire inside yourself. Now, we do all this work before returning to ask this question. Is it time for you to embrace yourself as a being who's lived many lifetimes? Now, there are two basic phases to this. One, there's the dipping the toe in. I entirely encourage you to dip your toe. You consider, and then you back away and you do something very present in this reality. Eat something that you know you love. Do a movement, do something with your body that builds your heart rate, gets you into now. And then dip your toe in again and ask your questions again. By tuning to the world as it is, doing healthy things, you will have a clearer mind to discern the truth, the reality of what you're learning. Now, be conscious, because people do get trapped in the dipping their toe in, and they get trapped for two reasons. One, perhaps unconsciously, you're scared to go be out of touch with the other people you love. It's a terrifying step to take, and we're here to support you in it. The Sanctuary, our online membership space, exists to maintain a circle where we are safe to share these things. We who Live with others who don't think about this stuff and they aren't ready to think about this stuff, and it's okay. But you need support, you need help, you need the health of knowing other people are going through what you're going through. And that's why the sanctuary exists. Please check out the website. Check it out. Now, to reinforce who we are together is to say, we're going to do something more than just dipping our toe in. Because the second reason people stay dipping their toes in is because it's scary. It's scary to go for another reason. You're not just leaving the people you've loved, you're going into memories of fighting, dying painfully. The most extreme moments stand out first. You don't get immediately thrown into how cool it was to bake a pie in the Middle Ages. At least that has not been my experience. You have to be able to contend with the peaks. They're literally, it's physics, it's spiritual physics. The intensity of the energy of a violent death is louder than how cool it was to bake a pie. That's just the way it works. So in order to gain access to the blessings of past lives, you have to be able to ride through the extreme. And it starts kind of dipping your toe. This is the gift of it. You're just like, okay, I see that. Wow, I keep seeing that vision. Why do I keep remembering holding a knife that way, staring at someone with a sword? And in time, you'll be able to discern whether this is just, you've gotten in touch with a fairy tale or you're really tuning into yourself. Now you let it deepen. Because as you leave the shore and you go in and you accept and embrace these feelings, something different happens. You'll start to bounce. You don't necessarily get to stay with one life. And this is designed to keep you sane. You don't want to drown in any particular life. You kind of have to tease yourself out in several directions. And as you do, this creates balance. Yes, it was awful and vicious here, but there was hope and kindness here. You can even remember the difficulty of socializing, social interpersonal dynamics. I was introduced to an Egyptian lifetime by remembering what it felt like to be tired of the social scene. And this somehow chills out the intensity of remembering a death or a violence in another life. Now, at a certain point, you've done enough. Be with this. The earth doesn't want you to go back. As fascinating and beautiful as it can be to visit, these are not lifetimes that were lived in a full, unconditionally loving way. We were still living in history, his story, a reality defined by male-female dynamics that were entirely framed to work through karma. Now, it's not a masculine fault. What it is the masculine energy was tuned to a particular frequency that was related to the karmic ocean. Then the masculine was given dominance because we had to stay there till we worked through the karma. And this kept dragging human society back to the work that needed to be done to work through karma. So it's fascinating. It's beautiful. I can't watch entertainment anymore because nothing is as interesting. I watched most of Game of Thrones, but it gets tedious. It's not as cool as the truth. Nothing is. I haven't found anything that's as interesting as the truth. Be with that. And then your mind has done enough work. You're not obsessed. You're not trying. You're allowing. You don't try. If you try, it'll work a little, but then you're going to spin out. Don't try. When it's time for you to learn something about a past life, you'll be drawn there. Imagine you've had dozens or even hundreds of past lives. You're not going to remember them all consciously in this life. So the health comes in centering and becoming increasingly present over and over again. You rechannel your energy into loving and living this lifetime, which I can almost promise you for most of you, this lifetime is better than almost every lifetime you've lived. Because the conditions, you don't have to live in fear of the weather, of starvation, of a lot of violence. Now, God Almighty, way too many people do still live with these fears, but you're talking to me on the internet regularly on a Tuesday morning. You are probably better off. So, as a broad statement, you need to cherish where you are, or you don't get to learn more. So, if you have excess, I want energy, bring it into now. Bring it into developing your spiritual practice. Bring it into getting out and breathing the air. Bring it into being curious about what the weather is going to taste like this morning. Be here. Be here. Be here. And then you'll get called. And it's this gentle respect for the visions that are given to you. And then you say, yes, I need to do this work. And it's this gentle discernment. You don't have to just dive full bore. Oh, I believe. When you do that, this other weird thing happens. Toe dippers have a problem. If you dip your toe enough that you get certain inspirations that are true, but then your mind starts to write stories. So one of the most basic mistakes we introduced earlier, and now we're going to tie up. The reason 4 people can go to a gathering and all claim they were Napoleon is because in the past, the personality cults had an even more dramatic impact on your spiritual presence. Meaning, if there was a personality cult in your culture, you identified with the energy of that person. So all you've really proved was you lived at the time of Napoleon and he was your guy. You revered Napoleon. That's it. That's it. It is far more likely, if you hear in your head, I was Napoleon, consider you were of what created Napoleon. Now here we're going to circle in and we're going to explain something that's really, it's a threshold for folks. I want it to sound a little boring at first because you have to engage it with maturity. We're living in this karmic ocean. It's a world defined by karmic patterns. And I want you to think of this in 2 ways. Imagine karma itself is the roots. It's an energetic root. You can't change it. It's under the surface of this reality. It's under the surface of this time. To pull up the root, you have to engage with what it grows well enough to know how. The easiest way to do away with the growth of a root is to cut it off at the surface, but it's just going to grow again. So a lot of people live through repeated negative patterns, and the patterns don't dominate them, but it takes up a lot of space and energy and strength. That's because you have to do more work. But what people effectively do, and this needs to be both boring and kind of scary, I want you to watch for this, and it's going to make you sad to see these patterns in the people you love, and I want you to forgive them almost immediately because we're all coming out of this. People are growing something on the surface of their lives that's karmic. Then they're cutting it because it's unpleasant, but then they still have the stuff that grew. So they're fighting over whose it is. So people are growing their own negative karma, cutting it and trying to give it to you. And you may be doing this to other people. And on the surface of our reality, we're still living in this external reality where so many people are defined by the way they are perceived, by their role in society. Even think in the United States, who are you? I'm a fireman. I'm a banker. People think of themselves as the person who has a role in relation to other people. Now, look at how big a deal this is. If I am, powerful statement, magic spell to say this, I am how my culture sees me. Whoa, what if I don't like how I'm seen? You telling me I don't have the right to change that? This is spiritual awakening. You're dying to the ego that accepts how you're perceived. No matter how good or bad it is, you're saying, I am not defined by how I'm perceived. Whew. It's a big deal. Now we're looking at the end of this. In my culture, my country, we're dealing with this Drumpf character. And he is just an archetype of gathering up a lot of people's karma and saying, I am the king of the karma mountain. And whoever can dominate the most karma gains power in a society that's defined by perception. So when a society is when a society defines enough people by how they're perceived, that they're exerting the levers of control. They can manipulate the rules. They can effectively steal by changing the rules and making it law. When a society has too many people who live this way, as we do, the rest of us don't get to fully live because we're surrounded by folks who are still defined by external reality. So they try to see us that way. So we have to navigate around this stuff. And it's very simple. In such a world, there is an external energy, a pranic energy that's defining who you are. So prana exists. This is not an illusion. This is not a mind trick. It exists in the material plane. But you don't have to be defined by external prana that's directed at you through people's perceptions. But if you are, you're essentially battling over dominance if you try to question it. And we're saying question it and keep questioning it. Because the deeper energy that comes through you, you can emit as prana. You can emit an energy into the world, yet it was originally defined from within your connection to source, the earth's hearth. When you allow the source of your existence to be defined from the center of the earth's hearth, you become someone who's emitting prana into the world in the form of art, in the form of just your presence. And you're starting to push back on this externalized reality. Now, you're not doing this to be dominant. You're becoming dominant by tuning to the source of the earth's heart. This is the story that we're aiming for. And spoiler alert, it looks like integration. It looks like integrating masculine and feminine presence. It looks like integrating the power of water and fire and earth and air. It looks like integrating the rainbow. When you integrate forces and find ways for them to balance within you, you overcome dominance paradigms and you become more dominant. It's ironic. But in many ways, to get there, you may have to lose. You may have to lose at the old games to kick you out of the arenas. You're not here to be in these arenas anymore. You're not here to take primary pleasure in defeating other people. It is sad. I cannot count the number of people who I have lost because they wouldn't stop fighting with me. And I wasn't fighting with them intentionally. I would simply flip their aggression back on them. And they would show me their sacred heart, but they would still be more afraid of me than in trust with the love. And all you have to do at a certain point of dealing with your own karma, all you have to do is hold the intention to reflect people's aggression back on them. And then you may have to be aggressive. You may have to go, what the fuck are you doing? And you let it move through you and you spin them off. And then it's sad. You don't get to jump up and down and dance. Yay, I won. It's sad. It's sad. You just lost a sacred opportunity. Because in most cases, your enemies are much closer to you than many other people. Your enemies are people who reflect your karma to you. Your enemies are people who are fighting with you over who owns the karma that's very similar. So in so many ways, your enemy is someone who knows you better than other people. I no longer have enemies. Really. Once you enter this space where you're simply reflecting aggression back on itself, you don't exist in the same stratosphere. I'm not immune from fights. People might think of me as their enemy, but if I don't participate, it's a different engagement. I'm well aware that people direct hostility towards me, and yet the vast majority of it flips back on itself. I'm just bouncing it. I'm just bouncing it. I'm not doing it. I'm not sitting there enjoying beating people. And this is what I invite you into. It's a deep responsibility. It's a deep power. And you can only own it when you own your full self, because it requires the full rainbow. You can't be discarding any part of yourself. You have to allow your karma, the roots of your karma will grow something and you say, this is mine. When you stop struggling to suggest that someone else is the crazy one, someone else is at fault, someone else is at blame, when you stop that shit and you just keep saying, you own what's yours, I own what's mine. You own what's yours, I own what's mine. Okay, what's mine? Every fight, every disagreement. My wife and I used to have the worst kick down fights. It was so painful. And they resolved with this simple approach. Every time I fought, I walked away. I said, okay, what do I got to deal with? Stop thinking, I can't believe she did this. I can't believe she did that. I wish she would change this. I wish she would change. And I just said, what? What have I got to face? What have I got to change? And I put my attention there. When you do that enough, something changes. Something changes. Now, how does this circle? This circles back to the purpose of our day, of our talk. Because you must do this work at the same time. Your past life presence is your sacred spirit on earth. Now, I want you to introduce another boundary, all right? There is your spirit tree. This is the collective presence you've had on earth throughout all your lifetimes. Each branch on the tree is a different life. Think of it this way. Each branch on the tree is a different life. This is an incredible presence. It is an incredible access to your full range of breadth and depth in this lifetime. When you gain access to all these other lives, you gain the skills, the intuition, the mental, physical, emotional development that you've earned. There's also your soul. Your soul existed before you came to earth. There are very crucial reasons you don't rest in your soul all the time. The entire spoiler, I love spoilers, you know this. Spoiler alert. The purpose of this life is to be a vessel that can receive your soul here. Here. You want to invite your soul into this body. But to be present enough and anchored enough in the material existence you have, you must love it. If you don't love it enough, your soul's going to be like, yo, no way. Your soul's not going to touch karmically driven realities. Your soul will only be present as a higher self trying to give you guidance out of karmic realities. This name is very misleading and unhelpful, in my opinion, this higher self idea, because that is a state. That is the state of your relationship to your divine presence. That is where it is above you, outside of you. To be the divine presence within, to draw this presence, to be aware of your many lifetimes, to be your full spiritual tree in this life. It's no longer higher. It's right here. So you start talking to, when you think of higher self, start talking to your higher self as if it's in your heart. You'd be surprised. I would bet most of you have been locating it up, right? This is not a small action. When you frame the conversation as if it's up and away from you, you have just placed your higher self outside of yourself. Place it in your heart. Place your higher self in your heart and talk to your higher self as if it's right here. And when you let the answers flower from within your heart, I assure you, they become much more accessible on a long-term basis. Any questions? Well, thank you guys. I believe, shared most of what I woke up ready to share with you today on this subject. So I'd love to weave with you a little more, but I'm sure I could riff on other themes if you don't pose it. Thank you, Helgi. Thank you for being here. The main thing I want to tell you is coming out of this is be excited. There is a lot of beauty waking up in the world. Now, make no mistake, these are the end times by prophetic presence. These are the times that were prophesied where the last wars happen and the earth starts over. But those prophecies were witnessed from within a frame of mind that couldn't see the beauty in nearly the same equation. So the simple version is there's going to be a lot of health and love and power and joy waking up while other processes and peoples break down. And you can't prepare for it if you think of against. What you have to do is go towards. So you have to allow yourself, you don't have to do anything, but if you want to stay and survive and be happy, you go towards. You dream of the beauty, you dream of the potential, you see it, you search for it. You search for the stories, you reinforce the stories, you dream of who you can be in a world that is transcending karma. And that leads you to opportunities and possibilities. It's the law of attraction. You will resonate from within and gather yourself towards possibilities and potentials of a beautiful, loving world. And this will literally look like you get an invitation to move. Now, you're not moving because you think a disaster is going to occur, but you will find that maybe that's what ends up happening. We're going to lose cities, people. We're going to have to redesign where people live. There's a lot of awful times ahead in this regard. I don't want to diminish it, and I want you to be steeled for it. I want you to be tough. It takes something to survive. But let me tell you, you want it. You are sick. You are sick in the life you're living. Yes? Tell me you're not. You are sick in the constraints. You are sick in the patterns. You are not being given the space to breathe and live. You're not being given the space to move your body. Why is it so difficult to get people to do practices? Because once you start moving your body adequately enough, you start to resist other patterns. You are locked in patterns that keep you who you are. And it's not a reveling in destruction. It's just, look, when the world challenges you to be your best, you get to be your best. Being confronted by the destruction of this life is both terrifying and totally liberating. Because once you stare at your own death, there's a little bit like, oh shit, that's not the end. Okay, well, if everything's this fragile, what am I gonna do? Hey, I'd like to live more. I'd like to be more. I'm not going to not do something just because it's a risk. Everything's a risk. Staying stuck and still is a risk. In some cases, it's the worst risk you could take. Well, here's the thing. This is crucial, and I emphasize it deeply now. When you awaken your power, you have to be ready to say no to strong feelings. Violent, sexual, just choices, just a strong pull to do something. You have to be able to stand in a strong pull and go, oh, what is this? Because let me tell you, the healing of our karmic past is very, very, very challenging. When you've lived through a trauma, you have a natural spiritual physics desire to relive that same trauma in a less damaging way. This is the story of karma. We don't just experience a negative pattern once, we experience it again and again and again. I, at one point, was in a relationship where I was living a repeated, very negative pattern, terrifyingly unhealthy. It did not resolve until I actually got in touch with a past life in which I remembered it going much worse, ending in violence. Now, in this lifetime, it didn't end in violence. Victory. I engaged the same karmic presence, but I didn't make the same choice. So the reason go with the flow is such a necessary statement to hold in your heart is because in so many ways, life is trying to lead you through a flow into a healthy way. But you have to be prepared for rapids too. And in rapids, you have to steer hard to not navigate into a whirlpool or an eddy. You have to steer hard to avoid the rocks. So you don't get to go on autopilot here. For many, many, many people, the medicine is go with the flow because you're too rigid. But you don't get to just check out here. You need to keep these opportunities in balance. Yeah, let life carry you. Yeah, when shit starts to fall apart, learn to recognize you can't piece this back together. Yeah, when you learn to wake up to how stuck you are and how sick it makes you feel to be as stuck as you are, you need to act. And at first, that won't be in the flow. You have to break the patterns that constrain you and put yourself in a flow. But if you reach to do these, life will help you. Life will help you. Alicia, thank you for being here. Gratitude for your presence. Absolutely. So decisions have so much to do with this. One of the first places to start is to stare at your decisions. Because many of your decisions are being made karmically, and some of these karmic decisions are being made from the perspective of past life. And I really encourage you to leave today with this appreciation. We have an innate drive to re-experience negative situations in a preferable way. We don't have an innate drive to go from trauma to heaven. It's you can't. You get the spiritual bends. You have an innate desire to go back into unfortunate circumstances and re-experience the same way in a preferable way. Please watch Groundhog Day. The story of re-experiencing life again and again and again, but making better choices with the same circumstances and challenges. This is life. This is karmic life. And over time, you wear down the karmic pattern. You experience things again and again and again to the point where you transition from having a magnetism that draws you into trauma relationships. Because extreme trauma, you'll just be bonded with other people who have extreme trauma with the goal of making something better than what either of you created before, what either of you lived before. But over time, if you do enough work with those forces, it becomes a subset. Sometimes you go through the trauma engagement. Sometimes you move through a trauma bond. But you get better and better at saying, yo, this is not going to run my life. In certain cases, you have to be able to realize that this is being driven from beyond this lifetime. You have to. Because if you don't, it will seem like an external hand moving you, pushing you. And from that perspective, it's too easy to be a victim. Now, look, life will not give you a clear answer to this frequently. Does everything you experience, is that something you've done? Maybe. This is what Gaia does to us. And she is very smart to do it this way. Maybe that relationship, you got treated abusively because you've done that to someone else. Maybe. You have to be able to say, maybe that was me. And you won't necessarily get a definitive answer. In more cases than not, I have not gotten a definitive answer. But in enough cases, I've been given, yep, you did that. And ooh, is there a humility? You won't just be humble in your relationships. You'll be humble in how you relate to the world. You'll start caring about mass incarceration. How many of you have some image of evil as the people who are locked up? Really? How many of you live with that idea? It's pleasant, isn't it? The problem is that your energy? that you're throwing at the prisons? How about this? Do this. I reclaim all energy that is mine from projecting on criminals. Now do that again tomorrow. And do that again the next time you think of someone who's terrifying. Because when you own your full karma and you allow it to lead into other lifetimes, you've done all that shit. You have to at least be able to say, maybe I did that. It's humbling. It's humbling. You're no longer better than all these other people. Ooh, oh, look at that. But it's so liberating. Remember, the work we're doing is liberating us from external evaluations of who we are. We are liberating our identity from being externally defined. This is incredible. You know, thousands of people visit this channel every week. Hundreds of you participate. I have to say, guys, I don't have much of an ego in it. This is what I do. I worry a little more than I appreciate it. You know, I worry about you guys. Folks show up and I'm like, oh shit, that person's been through it. I can tell. I know. I care. The positivity and the appreciation of the comments we've been receiving is incredible. And maybe this is dysfunctional on my part, but the way I deal with it is, I'd say 5% more than I drink in the appreciation. I worry about you guys because I care about you. Just hands down, a lot of people show up who they might not trust anybody else as much as they're trusting in this comment that they just made. And that's happening more and more. So base level, I'm not going to hold how you see me, even if you all team up. You know, like I'm going to be who I am in the woods by myself. And then I'm going to show up for you and do the best I can. And when it affects your life in a positive way, I am honored. I'm grateful. Thank you. Thank you for being here, for trusting us, for sharing your time with us. In 20 years, people will appreciate that time is the most valuable commodity by far. We're still living in the internet transition, people. All right? Like we haven't even begun to engage this. We have barely begun to engage this in an effective way. The reality is your time is precious, and I honor you for sharing it with us. I'm grateful to you. I appreciate this respect most of all. And the more we recognize this, I think the more good, loving people will be given the mic, so to speak, will get the attention. Because it's crucial that we come from a space not of, hey, I'm awesome. Listen to me. I'm the, don't you want to be like me? Look at, I respect you. I appreciate you for valuing us. I know that by believing in what we're doing and by giving your time, you're giving your spirit, you're helping to make this dream more real. And we've got a wonderful dream. We're building a sanctuary together. Please visit the website, check it out. You can come over. We're going to have a shared time discussion after this live feed for another hour. Start with a meditation. It goes in many different directions. It's a sacred time. You can check in, see what it feels like. Most of the people who attend are members of the sanctuary. And if you feel the calling, if you feel the attunement, you can hop over and join the sanctuary afterwards. So consider this. Consider, keep your heart today, just for today. Check in with your heart regularly. Be like, how's my heart feel? One of the best things you can do, and I'll give this to men more than women. It does impact people differently. But men, if you see a beautiful woman on your YouTube feed, do a double take and stare back again and pay attention to how your heart feels. Because what is attractive visually in an archetypal way can often draw us out of our body. And if you don't pay attention to what's the energy beneath, what's the energy exchange beneath, be present with that and learn to reference your heart regularly when something impacts you, grabs your attention, and ask, how does this affect my heart? And start making your decisions more with at least this value present. With that, let's breathe in our heart a little, people. Feel gravity holding you with love. Return here frequently. Build it as a fire. It'll keep burning for a while. Come back and tend it frequently. Ask your heart. Don't tell your heart. Ask your heart what it needs to feel good, strong. Hint. Be more loving. Be more grateful. Be more compassionate. Appreciate the gifts that are already present in your life. And with this, I bid you adieu. Thank you for being here. Larissa. Wow. Dang. Well, please come. Please come visit us. We're doing a wonderful job. Incredible people are gathering, and it's heating up now. We only launched this publicly 2 weeks ago. So, but we have been working together for 2 years in a smaller group. We've got the rhythms down. 5 people are in a teacher training to be able to do Wildflower Fire sacred chakra work with you. And we've got it. We got the momentum. We got the presence. We're ready. So bring it on. Come visit us. And consider signing up for the membership. It's a monthly offering. It's a service. It's a gift. It's a sacred. Your money is a sacred gift when it comes. It's not the only sacred gift. It's not as sacred as your time, but it is sacred. It enables this to work. So consider participating in this way. Jonathan, I'm glad you're here. I hope you joined us again, my dear friend. Larissa, this is happening more and more. There's a recent video where someone shared, I would love to quote, "This morning, I came out of a lucid dream in which a voice said, 'Today you will walk through the fire and be reborn.' And I walked to my phone and found your video. I'm so glad I'm here." Thoth is working through us. It's a real humbling thing. It's awesome. It's awesome. So it's my honor to be a part of it. I love you guys. May love be with you and your family. We'll see you soon.